What is education, and why is education important? Is it important? After all, what's the real purpose of getting educated about anything? We so frequently take education and the process for learning in general totally for granted. Not only that, but the ways in which we think. How we've gone about structuring our own consciousness itself has largely remained unchanged for a long, long time. So how do we literally change our minds? Can we reconfigure our own ways of thinking? And if so, how? Join Dr. Joseph Atman, the founder of one of the world's most revolutionary educational centers, Middletree, and award-winning broadcaster Tammy Trujillo for Educate Everyone and explore the mysteries of our own consciousness and the education we implement in order for it to be what it is.
Our guest on this episode of Educate Everyone is Jason Tavarez. He's the Director of Institutional Resilience at Westmont College in Santa Barbara, California, where he oversees risk management and emergency preparedness. He also serves as secretary on the board for Middletree, supporting educational equity and access through community-focused programs. In addition, Jason and Middletree founder Joe Atman go back many years, with a friendship that started in college in a special city called Claremont.
You and I know each other in a lot of different capacities, as we were just kind of talking about off the air for a pretty long time now.
I met you, it must have been 2008, 2009, give or take, something like that. And I was in the throes of law school. I was lucky, though, because I was actually a grad assistant, so I was considered a part-time law student. So it took me 4 years instead of 3. And I was a grad assistant for track and cross country, which was awesome because it got me outside, kept me active, kept me super handsome, as you can imagine. Joking for anyone that's listening there. The experience of being in law school is not very fun, but it's one of those things that I am so grateful for because it opened up a tremendous amount of opportunities and just ability to synthesize and think about information in a way that I wasn't able to beforehand. In my current role, I am the Executive Director of Institutional Resilience at Westmont College and the Title IX Coordinator. Institutional resilience is the fancy combination of words for risk and sometimes emergency management. For my role, I'm specifically in charge of risk and emergency management. And sometimes people find that nexus between that and law school hard to find. But for me, my education was an integral part of not just getting the position, but I'd like to think thriving in it. I guess you'd have to ask my coworkers and my boss if I'm thriving in it, but I have enjoyed my role tremendously. I started in 2020, moved up to Santa Barbara with my family in 2020. So right before, literally a month and a half before the world shut down due to the pandemic. And I was in charge of our pandemic response and trying to keep our doors open once the fall of 2020 happened. And we were one of the only schools in California that was able to not only have in-person classes, but actually have basically a relatively normal experience in the middle of the pandemic while also following all the rules. And I say that very intentionally because there were other schools, particularly in California, that just said, you know what, we're going to do whatever, we're going to keep our doors open. And if they find us, they find us. And at my heart, I'm a rule follower. And so I was tasked by the president of the college, by my boss, to figure out how we could keep our doors open. And fortunately, I had a lot of support, and I won't say a blank check, but a lot of resources behind me to help do that. So it made me look probably a lot better than I was at the time. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, very quickly, the very beginning part of my time at Westmont and kind of what I do a little bit there, Joe.
First of all, you're so good looking that you had to give some of that to your brother, who is the actual face and does sports.
Very kind of you.
As a TV anchor.
Yeah. It's Chris Tavarez, and he is at Channel 9 in Denver, so one of the premier local news stations in the country. And he's an anchor and reporter, and very proud of him, as you can probably hear. And he's an awesome brother. He's my little brother, so he's not older than I am. Fortunately for him, because I'm on the wrong side of 40 now, unfortunately. But he's awesome, and a great uncle to my boys and great brother-in-law to my wife, and just a good brother. So thanks for that, Joe.
Tammy Trujillo produces our show. She's an integral part of what we do here. It's not a job that, it's not all that common, right, to be that involved in media and do it at such a high level in broadcast.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So we both kind of know someone pretty well who is at that level. So it's just kind of a cool thing.
When you get to talk about stuff on camera for a living or talk about it on the radio for a living,
right.
I think that's just neat.
Tammy was really the one who pushed me to do this, to do Educate Everyone, to do the podcast. I went on her show, Community Cares. It's been running for over 15 years. She's done 812 or so episodes. So she had me on that show and she was like, gosh, you should do a podcast. So informative, yada, yada. So that's like how we got here. The point of all of this is to sort of explore and discover like people's journeys within their education and the educational space, just kind of in general. And you and I kind of know each other on such deep levels. I go to you because you not only have the legal background and work with this big giant university, but I go to you with all of Middletree's woes. And I hate to say it at this point, anytime that I call, I'm sure you assume it's not to just check in on how Volney and the kids are doing. It's always something Middletree related. You're a board member for Middletree. You're technically our secretary. You've been on the board. You're an original member. And Middletree itself, this is our 11th year. So you and I have known each other for a while at this point, and we also kind of knew one another at sort of an interesting time in our we were in our 20s in grad and or law school, respectively. You know, there's a lot of freedom as a student. You're kind of a professional student, but
that's what it felt like.
That's what it feels like, because that's your only job. I mean, some people have actual jobs outside of that, but it's hard to have an actual job and then do grad school, law school, whatever, med school effectively. And as you mentioned, you had an extra year or two tacked on because of being a grad assistant. I was a grad assistant for my master's degree, and that did tack on some time because you've got to...
Because you're working. You don't have enough time to do it all. Like I remember my classmates, it was really crazy, like looking at their course schedules. And it's not like I was slouching. I was basically 3/4 time. And I did it all after work. I would have cross-country practice, let's say in the morning at 6 a.m, do practice for a couple hours, then go and talk to the coach about recruiting, then get the field prep, then do all the extra ancillary training stuff and all those things. And then come 5 or 5:30, it's all right, time to head over to the campus and get ready for school and be in school for 3 hours, and then go do a bunch of case briefs and everything afterwards or beforehand or whatever. And then go out with you guys and keep the press's doors open a lot longer than they should have been and pay the light bill there. And then I remember I got practice in like 3 hours. I guess I'll just crash in the office and try and do a little work and not be late. But again, you're in your 20s, so you can kind of do that. Now the idea of that literally makes me ill. Cool time though. It was really fun because we made some really great friendships. Such a funky time. Your 20s, for anyone listening, your 20s are really awesome and terrible all at the same time.
It was a fun period. It was kind of interesting because we were in Claremont. Most people really don't know about Claremont, the town thereof. And it's really not such a town as much as it is like a culture almost, because you've got 5 of the most prestigious and yet lesser known colleges in the world.
They're all top 50 liberal arts colleges, right?
Every year. Pomona College, that I always joke, was rated... I think it's always Princeton Review, who's like the go-to ratings of colleges. And Pomona, the year that Middletree started, and we started on Pomona's campus, that was the year they were rated the #1 college on the planet.
Ahead of Harvard,
is that a coincidence?
Ahead of Yale,
Harvard,
Stanford, Northwestern,
Oxford,
all of them.
Everything,
Pomona was the best.
Pomona College. So Claremont, it's almost like this subculture within academia. It's almost like this cult of Claremont, because you've got thousands of not smart, brilliant undergrad students walking around. And I was in some of these classes because as a grad student, you could take whatever class that you wanted. Right. I mean, you had to get permissions, but they were usually rubber stamped, or at least they were back when I was going to school there. There were some giants in the field of philosophy and theology who were teaching at the Claremont College. I did audit some classes, but I took straight up for credit some classes there. And I always said that the undergrads were far more intelligent and capable than the graduate students. And that's really not a slight at the graduate students.
No.
The School of Theology, not to toot our own horns. I had a professor at Hofstra where I was going to grad school. When I got into Claremont, I hadn't even heard of Claremont, because, and this is kind of what I'm driving at, is like a lot of people outside of academia don't know about Claremont and the Claremont colleges and all that. And I had a professor tell me, whose name, no kidding here, he was a theology professor. His name was Terry Godlove. So that
you couldn't make it up because it wouldn't be real, right?
Exactly. Like if you were writing a book and the theology professor Godlove, people would be like, okay. He told me that, I was like, I'm going to this place called Claremont. I think he's like, there are a handful of schools for theology that you want to go to, and that's one of them. I'm like, really? Yep. Okay. And I told somebody else about Claremont, and they were like, oh yeah, process theology, John Cobb.
That guy is so famous, even I, the non-philosophy, non-religious studies kind of guy, knows John Cobb.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about, those kinds of giants in the industry.
But again, even as I was getting my feet wet in the field, I was unaware. So where I'm driving this bus is that there's this like culture of Claremont that precedes and exceeds the bounds of the actual physical town. But it makes
absolutely
very interesting culture. And you and I were an intricate part of that culture, not because we were such up-and-comers ourselves per se within our spaces, but because our crew back in the day was comprised of some pretty genius folks, which was just sort of par for the course, just given the caliber and quality of people who are just in that town and involved with the things that people are involved with over there.
You know, like to just kind of piggyback on that, the thing that I love so much about Claremont is that you could feel the college's tendrils in all parts of that town.
Right.
It was an awesome town. I mean, I bought my first ever house, the little townhouse, right next to Montclair, you know, right on the border, but it was still Claremont, so it counts. Right. I could walk my dogs to the dog park. I could walk to the village. I could go grab a bite. I could go to our favorite bar, and it was all walkable. But then it was just like this oozing kind of vibe of just intellectuality and just a bunch of smart kids running around, you know, and people trying to figure it out. But also I like the liberal vibe of it, and it was very education focused. And obviously the Claremont Unified School District is incredible. It's one of the few school districts in California that doesn't have reciprocity. And reciprocity, for those that are listening that don't know, is like you can basically apply to go to any school district in California, and you don't have to live in the district. They just have to have space for you. Claremont was one of the ones that did not accept outside students. And so that was one of the biggest reasons why we wanted to be there originally, because my wife and I were thinking about having kids eventually and all that kind of fun stuff, and wanted to, in case we got stuck there, we would have a good school district. But the town was awesome. There was always something to do. I had a bunch of friends that either lived there or were close to it. And then just the colleges in particular just had that old New England style feel. Like they'd been here forever, it felt like. And they were ivy covered buildings, and it just felt like just an awesome place to go and learn. In fact, they shot Teen Wolf 2, the one with Jason Bateman, on that campus because it was so beautiful. No, but Claremont was an awesome place, and I would go back there in a heartbeat, outside of the fact that I have roots in Santa Barbara now, and I cannot beat the weather out here, and I love my job, so it's hard to consider leaving.
So does Santa Barbara, because as you mentioned, like the tendrils of Claremont kind of saturate that's exactly what I was sort of trying to communicate. And it's sort of hard to describe to folks who have never been to Claremont.
It's a college town, but it doesn't feel like a typical one because
it doesn't feel like one, really.
Because there's five colleges that are competing for your attention, right? And then all of the students are nerdy and really smart, and they have great athletics, believe it or not, especially like water polo.
They do. Yep.
Random track and field athletes that are good, random football players. The Pomona Pizzers baseball
even
team.
Sean's basketball team is okay, despite his coaching there,
Oh, you have to. I cannot wait to send this to him because that was an awesome dig. And then like the kids that don't make it to an Ivy League school, they're choosing, and I say that's actually a misnomer. A lot of the guys on the Pomona Pitzer basketball team, those guys can go and play at the Harvards or Yales and be bench guys and actually get run every once in a while. But they choose to go to Pomona Pitzer because the academics are so good at either Pomona, and less or so at Pitzer, but still fabulously good at Pitzer. So it's such a neat vibe. So you're going to ask something about Santa Barbara, and I cut you off because I got too excited. Sorry.
No, all good. I just kind of wanted to bring up the Claremont connection because that's obviously where you and I not only got to know one another, but our careers started, our lives started from there.
Yeah,
and it wouldn't have been possible without that time. And I got plenty of gripes about Claremont too, and they have to go along with a lot of the things that make it so wonderful. Also, like you said, it's very academic. It's a little snooty at times. I think a lot of college towns have that reputation, and maybe that's not even fair to characterize it like that.
Well, what's funny about it though, even going into that, there's elements of faux liberalism where it's like a lot of NIMBY stuff. We're super liberal here, but we don't want to have reciprocity with other school districts. So
that's exactly my point. That's exactly my
that's
point,
not cool,
right? Not in my backyard. That's exactly my point. Let me just say that public school is still public school, right? Regardless of the town that it's in. And there's a lot of things that hamstring school districts from being all that they can be. And honestly, there's a lot of things that hamstring a lot of educational institutions from being all that they can be. But the Claremont colleges, the kind of interesting thing about them is that they have a lot of freedom, and it's a consortium. So there are 5 separate colleges there. And yet, at the same time, they do all sort of work together. I mean, there are 5 separate undergrad schools, and then there's Claremont Graduate University that I wouldn't say sits atop all of this. It really kind of doesn't.
Honestly, academically, it doesn't. Let's just be really candid. Again, Pomona, depending on what list you're looking at, is a top 5 school every year. Claremont Mudscripts is a top 15, top 20 school every year. And they only go up to 50. Pitzer is the quote-unquote least academically rigorous school or lowest ranked school, let's call it that. It's still a top 50 school, depending on what list you're looking at. And Claremont Grad School has good programs within it, and they're all good. Like, if you get in there, you're doing well. But it doesn't 100%. Have the same kind of reputation that the other ones do.
Right. As a whole institution, I think that that's probably true and correct. And some people might take umbrage with, some of those statements either way. But,
I'm not trying to wrinkle anyone's feathers here.
Well, right. We're talking about what common knowledge or the common perception basically is.
Exactly.
Right? So we're not making any grand statements.
CGU is an awesome, awesome university. And in fact, the president of Westmont, where I work, I think got one of his masters there at Drucker and has nothing but nice things to say. And there are great programs there. I'm just talking about the perception. And again, just to be really candid, rankings don't mean anything, and yet they do. So that's what we're talking about them, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, because it's all about perception, right? I mean,
exactly.
When you talk about that kind of stuff. And like you said, Drucker, the School of Theology, there are some amazing programs at CGU and plenty of other education department. There are awesome programs. And it used to be, when I was going to school there, it used to be that CGU was so well regarded, at least within philosophy and religion, that you could get any adjunct position anywhere. I didn't take advantage of that because I felt like I had kind of already just done that at Hofstra. Looking back, I kind of wish that I had, but if I had, or I may not have ever started middle tree, so I'm not.
You had different goals, Joe. You had different goals.
I did. I wanted to just hang out in California and be a student for once and be, and take in Southern California. Yeah. Of course, as I used to say, that I could have done that degree in Antarctica because I was basically just inside of a library and or a classroom for the majority of my actual coursework years doing that. So, but again, all of this is just to say that Claremont's kind of a unique where you and I not only met, but really started our lives. When you're in the midst of that kind of prestige and that kind of opportunity and around those kinds of folks, and it sort of just speaks to the importance of getting at least, the political side almost of getting a great education is it opens up a ton of doors. Just by us being in that town, it's the access, right? Just by us being in that town.
What's funny about that is it's the old saying, a rising tide rises all boats. And there have been numerous studies regarding students and access to education and the quality of education. By bringing in a student from a worse educational experience and bringing them into a nicer high school, they don't bring the high school down. Typically, the high school raises that student's academic progress. And I think just being in a town like that around a bunch of smart people and not wanting to feel left out or left behind or whatever, you're just forced to elevate your game. You have to be able to talk about stuff. And that's one of the things that's a segue for me to my world in academia is my love of liberal arts. I think that the Claremont colleges exemplify just how important a well-rounded education is.
Yeah.
I know. I might have been able to get in there 20 some odd years ago, but now I couldn't even fill out the application. Jeez Louise. I had to keep up, right? And there were great musicians, there were philosophers, there were academics, and my law school friends, all that kind of stuff. It was just a really neat place.
Yeah, and it's such a great point about a rising tide lifting all boats, right? And that goes in the human space here as well, because you're totally, totally right. And I think if you talk to athletes, amazing athletes, if you talk to, would Scottie Pippen have been Scottie Pippen if he didn't play with Michael Jordan? He would have been a great player, but would he have been Scottie Pippen, right? And folks who are around greatness, it does just elevate your game and who you are as an individual. And that's sort of, at least when I think back on it, kind of what Claremont did for me and our friends did for me at a young age. as I was, again, just launching my career and figuring out who the heck I was just in the world. I didn't get into philosophy for the wealth, the fame, or the notoriety. I got into it to have a better understanding of my own mind, consciousness. But when you're in a place, again, with so many brilliant people, it gives you sort of some pause and makes you interact with them. Everybody's just a human being at the end of the day, of course. But I was afforded audiences with, you mentioned John Cobb earlier. John became not only a mentor to me, but a dear, dear friend. And he was a great advocate to Middletree also. He really was. So just to be around those kind of folks, and I learned so much from them, and then I became better. Yeah, I don't think I was really adding all that much to the culture of Claremont.
Yeah, don't sell yourself short, Joe, but I think it's the collective group that brought us all up like that. It was a good time.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the importance, sort of close the loop or bring it back anyways to what we're supposed to be talking about here, which is the importance of education, right?
Thinking about education,
the importance,
and where we are in education, because I work in higher ed, right? I work at a small liberal arts college. And the reason I like it so much is the liberal arts college part of it. Because at the end of the day, I think that we have, in general, as an American society, have commodified education so much that it has demeaned the point of education. And education is not meant to be just college. It's meant to be a holistic kind of approach to bettering yourself. At least that's how I feel about it. And so education can be, obviously our K through 12 kind of education to get us ready to kind of start thinking about the rest of our lives. But then it can be trade schools, it can be university, it can be a research institution, it can be a liberal arts college. But the idea is to expand your mind to be able to think. And I think everyone should have the opportunity to go in a direction that makes them feel fulfilled, but also helps them expand their mind. And that's, again, going back to our Claremont point, that's what was so cool about the Claremont colleges, because it was the epitome of that liberal arts essence, right? Where you could do a little bit of everything. They had an engineering school, they have the hard sciences, they have all the philosophy, they have all of the history, all that kind of stuff. And having people have access to that is of paramount importance, because a society that doesn't value education, regardless of the type of education, doesn't move forward, and you can't progress.
And now the Middletree Minute.
This is Kristen Hernandez, Middletree's executive assistant. Do you want your student to remember more from class? Help them connect the dots. Say they're learning about the water cycle in school. Ask, have you ever seen water evaporate from a sidewalk? That little connection builds a mental anchor. The brain loves patterns. The more links, the better the memory. So next time, connect school to real life. That's how you make learning stick. And that's the Middletree Minute.
And now a quick look into Dr. Atman's book, A Philosophical War. We've been talking, Joe, about how human beings are given certain interpretations about the world before they're really able to start deciding for themselves if those interpretations match who they are as individuals. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. So again, we're kind of talking about the larger process of what it is to be conscious as a human being. What is it to be conscious as a human? What does that mean? What does that look like? Why does consciousness manifest within human beings in the way that it does? Because again, we all kind of have this general way by which we are conscious. And yet at the same time, we have different interpretations about the world itself. We are born into a particular tribe or family, and that family lives in a particular geographical area on the planet. So we're born into that tribe at that location. And because of those things, our tribe, our family has had this whole lineage of experience that has come to inform who they are. And they're almost instantly going to impress those things upon their children, upon their young families. You might be born into poverty, which is going to have inherently within it its own experience with the world. You might be born into wealth, similarly, is going to have its own experience with the world. You might be born into a political family. You might be born into a very religious family. We're given all of these things. You might be born in a very, very warm climate. You might be born in the mountains. All of these things are going to give us a way by which we go about interacting with the world without us even realizing it, because we as individuals just assume, well, this is our experience and this is what it is to be me. And that's absolutely true. However, we're also given this whole set and structure of the experience of our tribe, of our family, of the time in which we were born also. I mean, someone born in Somalia in the 16th century is going to have a vastly different experience than someone who was born in New York City in the 21st century, regardless of your class, caste, status, ethnicity, regardless. It's going to be a very different experience because human beings understand their own human nature in very different ways based on simply the time and the location and all of these different factors that we're talking about. So we're born into very different experiences. And with those experiences, we have the set of beliefs that are put into us, the set of things and interpretations of the world that inform us about who and what we are. And of course, beliefs, and we can talk more about this also, but beliefs are things that we utilize. They're kind of bridges between what we know and what we don't know. We believe that if we act a certain way, we'll be treated a certain way, either in this life or another. That might not be true. We could do everything good in this world, and maybe there is nothing after it. We believe that it's the right thing to do in any situation. We believe that this choice is the right choice to make. We believe that any number of things. You can believe anything, but a belief is just a tool by which we utilize to get from what we think to what we don't know. It's simply a bridge. And so we have all these beliefs that we put into our young ones and put into our culture. And this is how cultures themselves are formed. And of course, cultures have interpretations of the world, and because of the varied experiences that they carry with them. They have a memory. They have a memory of their own past, and then they present that memory in the present moment. And yet, children don't think about this. You are given all of these things as a child. Generally speaking, you're born into, again, a race, an ethnicity, a family that has its own religious views, whatever they might be. And so you're given a way to navigate the world before you can decide for yourself if those things actually work for you as an individual, as an individualized consciousness with his or her own experiences. And it's not until we tend to be roughly within the age of adolescence that we start to wake up and say, wait 1 second, is this true? Do I really believe this? Am I really this person? Or was I just given this identity because that's my tribe, my culture? So we start to sort of grapple with that notion and idea about who and what we are, and again, what our relationship to the world is. And yet we've been conscious beings at this point for quite a long time already, 10, 15 years at this point. And we've already put together a framework for the world. We already have this sort of working foundation about who and what we are, even if we begin to question it. So we already have framed things and set ourselves up to look at the world in a certain way. Again, even if we do start to question it. So then we have to realize and acknowledge that, and realize and acknowledge that a lot of those definitions that we have about the world, about ourselves, are actually based on beliefs that, again, are not necessarily in themselves realities. Again, beliefs are bridges between things that we hope and think and what we hope that actual outcome will be. We put our faith into beliefs, and we utilize beliefs because we don't truly know. And at some point, we begin to see that this whole culture that we have built for ourselves and around ourselves are largely based on interpretations and beliefs. And that's when we start to question whether or not, again, this works for us as individuals. So that's how we begin to sort of break through this sort of matrix of what consciousness actually is and how we go about being conscious beings with and within the world.
Thank you for listening to Educate Everyone with Dr. Joseph Atman and Tammy Trujillo. Join us each week as we explore the inner workings of our own minds and the educational system which builds and supports it. Also, check out our website at middletree.org to see what opportunities Middletree's programs can offer you or your student. And join us on social media. If you have any questions you'd like Dr. Atman to answer, please leave them on a post or send us a message, and you may hear them answered on the next episode of Educate Everyone. Until then, thanks for tuning in.